What systems in the body does X39 balance? Okay, let's go back, and instead of talking about this, let's look at a clinical study. We're going to look at a double-blind placebo-controlled study we did starting back in 2018 using urine analysis. And this was a study with 50 people. And we wanted to look in a population of people that was over the age of 63. A reason for this is that stem cell activity declines dramatically over the age of 60. You could say a 60 to 80% drop in not only the number of stem cells, but when you're looking at the stemness, the functionality of those stem cells, their ability to release growth factors and repair tissue. Not coincidentally, there is a 60 to 80% drop in copper peptide after the age of 60. So the level of stem cell activity in the body quite closely parallels the levels of copper peptide. So what we did in this study is we wanted to look at immediate effects. This was very early on in the days where we were trying to determine whether or not X39 worked. So we kept the studies very brief. The idea is that if you're stimulating the body with light, we should see an immediate response. So let's take data at baseline after 24 hours of use, and then let's look at what happens after 1 week of using X39. Are there going to be any effects? And we certainly did find effects. So the first thing to know about X39 is that it improves the metabolism. And we see this show up in utilization of amino acids. So amino acids, of course, are the building blocks of proteins and peptides. And this is important because if we have a long-term injury, there's going to be inflammation, there's going to be damaged tissue, and we want to repair that. And the only way we're going to repair damaged tissue is that if we're making collagen, a protein, and that requires the synthesis of amino acids. So what we found was that you put X39 on, and it starts to increase the synthesis of and utilization of amino acids. So that's very, very important. Now, another thing that we found, which at the time to me was surprising in a good way, was that we were seeing improvements in memory within the first 7 days. And that is staggering. Now, we've done research into cognitive function for many, many years. It's an obvious concern for anyone that's aging, which is 100% of the population, and especially for people after they get over the age of 50, when most people have experienced mitochondrial dysfunction, they've got undesirable changes in their hormones, and their memory begins to suffer for a variety of reasons. So to see an improvement in memory in the first 7 days was remarkable. And in fact, we have a separate study looking at exactly why this is and why it happens. We also saw a reduction in blood pressure, which is great. So we don't make any blood pressure claims, but one of the things that we know is that X39 is certainly safe for cardiovascular health. And if you have low blood pressure, not to worry. If you have low blood pressure, you're not going to see a decrease in your blood pressure. This is relative to people with blood pressure that's higher than normal. Now, heart rate variability measures the ratio of muscle contractions in the 4 chambers of the heart. And we've done many studies on heart rate variability over the years, going back to 2005. So it was great to see that by elevating copper peptide, we could see the heart rate variability improve. The rhythm of the heart improves. And there's a lot of benefits to that, not only for the heart, but for the nervous system. remarkably, we saw that people started to see an improvement in the quality of their sleep the first 24 hours. Now, I hope all of you are going to be at Nova, because I'm going to be covering this in great detail. We're going to be doing an entire training on different types of health conditions and what type of options there are for you to resolve your health condition naturally. I'm not going to be making any medical claims about the patches. And anyway, come to Nova and you can see what we're going to talk about there. But one of the subjects I'm going to cover is sleep. So if you have insomnia or you're having difficulty sleeping, you're not sleeping more than 4, 5, 6 hours, there is definitely help available that's natural, that works great. You have so many options, and we're going to cover that in great detail in Nova. Okay, an improvement in vitality. So when we're looking at anti-aging effects in the body and we want to reverse human aging, it's going to all start with the ability of our cells to make energy, make and use energy. And that happens in an area of the cell called the mitochondria. And normally, as people age, the way they make and use energy and cell communications declines rather sharply. So what we saw was a very powerful anti-aging and age reversal effect with X39. It improves overall health and vitality the first week that you use it. Now, we know that X39 elevates copper peptide. We're going to show our first blood study, actually, that we did, and there's multiple blood studies that we've done. Copper peptide resets the genes to a more youthful state, 1/3 of the genes. So, of course, what we'd like to have is 100%. But resetting 1/3 of the human genome to a younger, healthier state produces remarkable effects. And we see that show up in our testing. X39 is also going to improve breathing. And that gets statistically significant as we approach 7 days. Those are some of the things that we have measured as benefits of X39, and there's many other health benefits. Another way to look at this, when we talk about what systems in the body does X39 balance, you can see that this is a systemic effect. X39, because it improves memory, it's improving the health of the brain. X39 is improving heart rate variability, so it's good for the heart. X39 is improving utilization of amino acids. We find proteins throughout the entire body. So copper peptide is going to have systemic effects. Let's look at 2 public domain published studies on copper peptide. Let's start with this one, regenerative and protective actions of copper peptide in light of new gene data. So, first of all, Lauren Picard was the person that discovered copper peptide. And my opinion is that he needs a Nobel Prize. His work that he did over a period of 50 years on copper peptide is unparalleled. He was the first one to make the observation that you take old liver cells from someone that's 80, and you put them in the blood of someone young and healthy, and those old cells start to function like younger, healthier cells. And one of the factors that's responsible for that is copper peptide. So he should definitely get a Nobel Prize for that work. Now, as part of his published data, one of the things that he finds is that copper peptide resets thousands of genes to a more youthful state. One of the things we might want to look at here, and again, he did this work on injections of copper peptide or examining copper peptide in vitro in a cell culture. We do not do studies looking at anti-cancer effects with X39. We don't look at DNA repair. These are medical claims, so we don't do that type of research. But from the point of view of looking at effects of copper peptide, this is extremely interesting. So when we see people get a reduction in stress and anxiety with X39, and especially the combination of X39 and Eon, we can point to clinical data to see, okay, that makes sense. There's anti-anxiety, anti-pain effects from copper peptide. DNA repair is really interesting to me. And there's also effects with copper peptide where it can protect the body from UV radiation. As an example, one of the things we learned quite by accident was you put on an X39 patch, and we see that many people do not get a sunburn, that they simply go directly to a tan. That's an exciting benefit of X39 that I have personally enjoyed. My heritage is German, Italian, and Irish, and I have Irish skin, no question about it. So my entire life, I have burned quite easily in the sun. So if you're someone that burns easily, what I recommend doing, in addition to trying X39, still use sunscreen, of course. I'd have to recommend that legally, but also make sure you're taking a copper supplement. 2.5 milligrams of copper glycinate would be fine. There's natural sources of copper, such as wheatgrass, chocolate, liver especially is very high in copper. But if you want to cover the bases, take a daily supplement. Copper is an amazing antiviral. So especially in a post-COVID world, taking copper daily is a smart way to help give yourself protection and for some of the other benefits associated with copper. But in any case, this is a good study to look at with respect to benefits of copper peptide. Another one is this one over here, and we're going to talk about recovery of stem cells. But just so you can see where this is coming from, it is in this article here, again by Dr. Picard. GHK peptide is a natural modulator of multiple cellular pathways in skin regeneration. If you simply do a search on copper peptide and stem cells, you can find these studies quite easily. You can even just do a Google search on GHKCU and clinical studies. And again, you can find it quite easily. So this article is going to give a great introduction to copper peptide and some of the many, many benefits that are associated with it. There's one on DNA repair. So there's been a lot of information that's been obtained through clinical studies on the connection between copper peptide and stem cells. I know this was one of the questions that was being asked. So copper peptide acts as what's called a Yamanaka factor. And copper peptide is going to have a number of significant benefits when it comes to stem cells and wound healing. And that's quite evident by all the clinical research. So how does this work exactly? First thing is that all of the benefits of copper peptide eventually trace back to the use of this peptide as a gene modulator, meaning it's going to reset genes to a younger, healthier state. When we're looking at stem cell activity, the relevant gene is P63. P63 is going to turn on the ability of stem cells to proliferate. So in other words, let's say that you have an acute or chronic injury. Few things there. First thing is there's an inflammatory response. So if you want to heal from any chronic injury or a chronic health condition, you've got to get the inflammation under control. Now, there's ways to do this through your diet, through your lifestyle, through supplementation. We don't make medical claims about the patches. Elevating glutathione, using a product like Eon helps to manage inflammation. The only thing we claim about that is that it's useful for stress reduction and useful for managing pain. Where this matters, though, is that stem cells are going to be killed off by oxidative stress and inflammation. So if you're wondering, why do I have arthritis? How come I haven't healed? You got to get the inflammation under control so the stem cells can go in there and repair the damaged tissue. So copper peptide is going to be part of reducing inflammation and managing it. It's going to make the stem cells act and behave like younger, healthier cells, and it's going to allow the stem cells to get to where they're going. Copper peptide also acts as a Yamanaka factor, meaning that you increase the copper peptide levels in the skin, and they revert skin stem cells back over into pluripotent stem cells. Those pluripotent stem cells then get into the blood, get into your circulatory system, and go to where they're needed. So elevating copper peptide has enormous benefits when it comes to repairing damaged systems in the body. This was also something that I thought was worth mentioning. It's with VEGF. When we were doing our stem cell research at the National University of Ireland in Galway, this was the key growth factor that we were looking at, VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. And that's because of the obvious benefits that VEGF is going to have on the circulatory system, on the cardiovascular system. So if you can elevate VEGF, I'm not making a medical claim. This is for injections of copper peptide. Copper peptide injections can be used to elevate VEGF and treat many different types of cardiovascular disease. So that's the interest in it. And of course, you study MSC stem cells, which I pronounce as mesenchymal because that's how they pronounce it in Ireland. I know there's other pronunciations for that.